Alright, I'm gonna get a lot of backlash for this video, I already know it, but I still want to talk about it because I deeply, genuinely care about this topic. Bit of an odd way to start a video, so here's what I mean. I think Warframe's new tutorial quest, The Teacher, failed. In fact, I believe there wasn't even a way that this could have ever achieved its goal of being a good modding guide. And in this video, I'm gonna tell you exactly why I think this is, and also how I personally would fix it if I had the chance to. And with that being said, big shoutouts to all our generous channel members, and let's jump right into it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First of all, just in case you've heard it for the first time, The Teacher is a new quest that was introduced with the last update, and it is meant to be a tutorial quest which takes place right after the very intro quest War's Prize, so the point in time where a new player would see this quest would be round about 1 hour into their playthrough. If you want to play it yourself, you can do so via the codex. And with that being said, first of all, what I want to talk about here are actually the good parts, because believe it or not, even though the title is pretty negative, there are a lot of things that I genuinely like about it. On the one hand, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It is a quick quest, around about half an hour, and after the roughly 1 hour long intro quest War's Prize, I think it doesn't overstretch anyone's patience. Also, one more thing that it does that until now Warframe hasn't had is, it officially introduces the Corpus as a major enemy faction into the game in a cinematic way. We remember, the intro quest War's Prize introduces the Grineer as the bad guys, but until now, the Corpus were always kinda sorta just there as soon as you go to Venus. Now, they are introduced with their own little quest too, and I think that's pretty cool, but that's not all. In addition, another great thing that this quest does is, it ties Teshin, one of the most important characters in the game, into the lore at a very early point. Before the Teacher quest, the first point where we actually engage with him, if I'm not mistaken, was in the War Within quest, so he never really appeared that much as a main character. Now he does, and I think that's great. And then finally, and I know this sounds absolutely crazy given the introduction and the title of this video, I actually think The Teacher does a really good job at showing the player that the modding system exists. I like the fact that they talk about Endo, that you can use it to upgrade your mods, how to dissolve your duplicates to get Endo. That's a very important mechanic and people need to know this. The only little nitpick that I have here would be that I personally would have just introduced base damage with the Serration mod in the quest instead of going for elements here, but that's really just a small thing. So yeah, sounds pretty good, right? Why the negative title? Why is this quest a fail? Well, that's what I'm gonna explain right now. See, I think one of the reasons that I and also many other veterans were disappointed with the way this quest turned out is that I believe the developers set the wrong expectations when they announced the Teacher quest at TennoCon. Let's have a listen.
We are proud to announce that for the first time in Warframe history, a mod quest to teach you how to mod. So if you're a new player and you just don't understand modding, we have a new quest called The Teacher.
Now, please don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to personally attack Rebecca here or anyone else. I'm just saying, if you introduce the quest as teaching people how to mod, and then in the quest itself you put 2 simple mods on a rifle and call it a day, then the ambition of teaching people how to mod is a little bit of a stretch. Yes, The Teacher is a good quest, and it is very good at all the previous things that I mentioned. But the one thing it is not is a quest that actually teaches people how to mod. Not even close. And that's also exactly the reason why it had to fail, why it was destined to fail right from the get-go. See, the Teacher quest is in an impossible position. On the one hand, you have a modding system that is very complex with tons and tons of mechanics and things to teach. However, on the other side, you have a new player who's only been in the game for 1 hour, just finished War's Prize, and gets thrown into the Teacher quest. So let's be honest, do you really think it would be a good idea to throw this poor little player into a 2-hour text dump exposition of the entire Warframe wiki to make sure that they really have heard about every single mechanic there is? Of course not. And everybody who genuinely believes this would be the right way to go here has completely lost touch. That's what I mean. That's why this quest was destined to fail. It could have A, be this super duper tedious information dump for 2 hours, which would have for sure made 95% of new players instantly quit the game forever, or option B, the one that it actually went with, it just scratches the surface a teensy tiny little bit to not be too overwhelming, but then that new player still doesn't really know how to interact with the modding system. This quest had an impossible choice to make. Both options are not great. However, I might have an idea for a potential third way right here. That's how I would quote-unquote fix the situation, so let's talk about that next. At the end of the teacher quest, you get this voice line from Teshin.
Your Lotus has graciously offered me residence in the relay. Come see me when you wish to learn more.
Now, in reality, there's nothing that happens afterwards. I checked it for myself, I went to a relay and there was no new dialogue option or anything, but my personal solution starts right here and builds up on exactly this line. Here's what I would do. First of all, I would keep the teacher quest basically unchanged. Maybe, as I initially mentioned, instead of going for elemental modding, I would just introduce it by having the player slot Insurrection as a base damage mod. But outside of that, I would keep the teacher quest exactly as it is, exactly in the same position, and no further changes to the quest itself. Instead, what I would do is create a new simulacrum-like environment in the game. Maybe you could actually even set it in Teshin's base from the quest, and then every player could freely visit this environment anytime. Within it, you will have Teshin as an interactable NPC, and when you talk to him, it would open a menu with different menu points, each one of them being a short, tiny lesson on one individual modding mechanic. So, for example, we would have one lesson for base damage, one for elements, one for crit, faction damage, and for Warframes we would have something like health tanking, shields, strength, duration, efficiency, and so on. Each and every one of those lessons would be very, very short and to the point, maximum 1 minute, and the only thing you do in it is see how your loadout works by default, then you would apply that specific mod, and afterwards try it out with the mod so you can see the before-after comparison. That's it. This way, a new player could learn step by step which different kinds of mods and modifiers there are, and directly have the before-after comparison for what those mods specifically do. If you wanted to, you could maybe even introduce a small reward like 300 endo, 10,000 credits or something for the first completion of every single lesson to incentivize new players to actually engage with it. But the important part is that each lesson is only very short and bite-sized. It can be replayed at any time in case you want to check up on your information. And this is the most important part, in order to get into this training environment, we're not going to hide it in any of Teshin's dialogue options on some relay. No, we're going to put a direct button into the mod screen that is always there by default. Maybe you can toggle it off in the options, but it needs to be on by default. And on the button, it will say, "Learn how to mod." So whenever a new player happens to open any type of mod screen, there would be this big prominent button, and if the player feels like, I have no idea what all of this feels very overwhelming, they could just click the button, be teleported to that training environment, talk to Teshin, and pick whichever lesson out of that list that they want to have it explained to them step by step. This way, you get the best out of both worlds, with, on the one hand, all the important information being present in the game and being taught, but on the other hand, no player is forced to interact with all of this right away. They can just click the button whenever they feel like and check up on the information that they think is important at this point in time. In fact, you could even go further and tie the availability of some of these lessons to your story progression. For example, at the start, you would just have a lesson on base damage, elemental damage, crit, and maybe health for your Warframe. And then as you go further and as you unlock more complex mods, more lessons for those specific mechanics would be unlocked in Teshin's menu. Now, this would be how I personally would introduce it to the game. have the teacher quest to show that a modding system exists in the first place, and then give players a prominent option to access a training environment where they can learn all the other mechanics in simple, short lessons. However, you might say, this sounds like a great idea and all, but it is so much work. There is no way that they could ever implement such a complex system. And to that, I honestly say no. I mean, let's be real. The assets are already there, right? Teshin is already there. Teshin's base environment is already there. They can completely reuse that. And all that would really need to be done about it is record additional voice lines for Teshin explaining the specific scenarios, but that would only be 2 to 3 sentences per lesson. We want to keep it very, very short and to the point. So, in my opinion, the whole writing and recording for just those menu items shouldn't take longer than, a week? And beyond that, all you really need is the UI for this new menu, plus, of course, the coding for every individual lesson. Of course, I'm no game developer, but I genuinely believe this would not be months worth of work. You could reuse a lot of assets, and with that final Teshin voice line that you get after the teacher quest,
come see me when you wish to learn more.
This would even look like it was an intentional addition all along. I think it would be perfect. But what do you think about it? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you also want to know how the new Warframe update made crits absolutely broken, then check out this video next. Another massive shoutout to Niels V, Demon Lord Cell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nost Linux Gaming, Turtlepeer, Ondakanio2, Skyla Bowser, Mihawky, Phil the Meme, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Morizaki, Shadow Lockhart, Han Tagas, Patricidator, Boomia1, Zave, Awindai, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot.